The boardroom was silent, except for the hum of the air conditioning and the clicking of pens. A long glass table stretched across the room, reflecting the sterile glow of the overhead lights. Men in tailored suits leaned back in their chairs, confident, loud, comfortable in their power. And at the far end of the table sat Naomi Ellis, 27, precise, quiet, the only black woman in the room, the only one who didn't speak just to be heard. Her notepad was filled with figures, ratios, projections, the kind of numbers that could save the company if anyone bothered to listen. She adjusted her glasses, hesitated for a moment, then lifted her hand. Her voice, calm but steady, broke through the low murmur of conversation. "I think there's a way to stabilize the next quarter without layoffs," she began. Heads turned, a few eyebrows raised. The CEO, grey hair slicked back, arrogance disguised as charm, smirked. "Sweetheart," he said, drawing out the word. "Let's leave the numbers to the big boys." Laughter rippled around the room. It wasn't cruel in sound, but it was cutting in meaning. Naomi forced a polite smile, lowered her eyes, and nodded. But inside something sharpened. She looked down at her papers again, not to retreat, but to remember. Every graph, every column, every data point in front of her told a story they refused to read. She had already done the work. She knew what was coming. She could see the cliff they were walking toward, and the numbers, the same ones they dismissed, were her map away from it. The meeting continued as if she hadn't spoken. Voices layered over one another. Projections, egos, meaningless jargon. Every man in the room wanted to sound like a leader, but no one was listening. Naomi sat still, her pen motionless now, her thoughts louder than any voice around her. They called her sweetheart, but she was the only one who knew the company's heartbeat. She traced her fingertip along the edge of her notebook, letting the moment brand itself into her memory, the laughter, the tone, the smirk. Because someday it would matter. She didn't argue. She didn't correct. She simply observed. That was her advantage. While they laughed, she calculated. While they talked, she listened. And while they dismissed her, she planned. The CEO's voice filled the room again, heavy with self-importance. He was talking about market dominance, about aggressive expansion. Words that sounded powerful, but underneath them, Naomi could see the cracks forming in the data. Every projection he praised was flawed. Every reassurance he gave was based on denial. She had the real numbers, but the truth didn't belong to her yet. She glanced around the room, studying their faces, the partners nodding in agreement, the analysts pretending to take notes, the interns trying to stay invisible. She saw what power looked like up close, and she saw how fragile it really was. The man across from her chuckled, whispering something to the colleague beside him, eyes darting toward Naomi. She didn't react. Instead, she straightened her posture slightly, folded her hands, and waited. When the meeting adjourned, the men stood up in unison, stretching, shaking hands, their laughter echoing off the glass walls. The CEO passed her chair on his way out, offering a patronizing pat on the back. "Don't take it personally," he said, not even slowing his stride. Naomi smiled faintly. "Of course not," she replied. But the calm in her tone wasn't surrender, it was precision. As the room emptied, she stayed seated, her reflection caught in the polished table, the same reflection she saw every day, a young woman they underestimated, framed by a world that didn't yet know her name. She closed her notebook, but her mind didn't stop. Every insult was data. Every condescending word was a variable in the equation she was building quietly in her head. She gathered her papers, slid them into her bag, and looked once more at the chair where the CEO had been sitting, the seat of authority, surrounded by yes-men. She didn't envy it. She analyzed it. That was the difference. Outside the conference room, the world buzzed with noise, phones ringing, assistants rushing, doors closing. Naomi walked down the hallway, her heels striking the marble floor like a metronome, measured, deliberate, composed. To everyone else, it looked like nothing happened, just another meeting, another suggestion ignored. But to her, something had shifted. They thought her silence meant acceptance. It didn't. It meant strategy. She knew the value of patience, the kind that doesn't beg for recognition, but builds toward inevitability. As she passed the glass walls of the office, she caught glimpses of the city skyline. San Francisco bathed in pale sunlight, steel and ambition woven together. Somewhere in that maze of towers and egos, her idea, the one they laughed at, was waiting to be proven right. She reached her desk, set down her papers, and opened her laptop. The spreadsheet glowed on the screen, numbers lining up like soldiers in formation. She adjusted one cell, then another, refining, tightening, perfecting. Her fingers moved with purpose. The laughter from the boardroom still echoed faintly in her memory, but now it fueled her. She didn't need to raise her voice. The numbers would speak for her soon enough. In a world obsessed with noise, her silence was her weapon, and before long it would become her victory. It's long past midnight in the high-rise heart of San Francisco, and the glass towers that once gleamed with arrogance now stand like silent monuments to exhaustion. The boardroom is empty. The laughter that filled it earlier, the condescending jokes, the patronizing smiles, has long faded. Only one light remains on in the vast open office floor. Naomi Ellis sits at her desk, the glow of her monitor the only warmth in the room. Her fingers move with quiet precision over the keyboard. No hesitation, no wasted motion. The rhythmic clicking of keys echoes in the silence, steady, methodical, relentless. She scrolls through endless columns of numbers, dissecting the company's financial arteries, tracing the slow bleed that no one else dared to look at. Her face is calm, but her mind is electric. She runs simulations, cross-checks reports, builds models that no algorithm the company paid for could rival. The more she works, the clearer the pattern becomes. The data speaks to her like a whisper only she can hear. Hidden inside the chaos of quarterly losses and market projections is a path, a way out, a solution elegant in its simplicity and brilliant in its scope. The same men who laughed at her couldn't even begin to see it. They were too blinded by their own certainty, too sure of their titles, their tailored suits, their assumptions. Naomi doesn't smile. She doesn't allow herself the satisfaction of being right. Not yet. She knows numbers better than she knows people, and numbers don't lie. They simply wait for someone to listen. She adjusts her glasses, leans closer to the screen, eyes narrowing as she catches an inconsistency buried deep in a spreadsheet. She traces it line by line until it reveals what she suspected all along. Mismanagement, overspending, and blind risk under the CEO's watch. She exhales slowly. There it is. The truth, clean, undeniable, cold. She opens a fresh document and begins to type. Her tone factual but firm, her language stripped of emotion. Every line of her report is a blade, not of revenge but of precision. It's not about humiliating them. It's about saving what they built despite themselves. The glow of the monitor reflects in her eyes, turning them into twin mirrors of resolve. The office hums quietly, a low mechanical purr that feels almost alive, as if the building itself recognizes her defiance. Somewhere outside, the city sleeps, but Naomi's mind is wide awake, weaving a masterpiece of logic and foresight. The clock ticks past 2 a.m. She glances at her reflection in the dark window, a faint outline of a woman who has been underestimated too many times. She doesn't look angry, just steady, just composed, in control. Her phone buzzes with a new email from HR, a reminder about an upcoming leadership development seminar. She lets out a soft laugh, the kind that sounds like disbelief wrapped in patience. Leadership, she whispers under her breath. If only they knew. She saves her final draft, encrypts her data, and backs up the model on a flash drive. Not because she doesn't trust them, but because she knows exactly what they're capable of. Then she sits back, her shoulders relaxing for the first time in hours. The silence feels heavy, but not empty. It's the kind of silence that comes before something shifts, before balance returns, the kind of silence that hides thunder. In that stillness, Naomi closes her eyes for a brief moment, not to rest but to focus. She doesn't need applause. She doesn't crave validation. What she wants is accuracy, justice, truth. And in this world, her world, truth is power. When she opens her eyes again, they are different, colder, sharper, ready. The woman who walked into this office as an analyst will not be the same one who walks out. She saves the final file, recovery proposal final XLSX, and closes her laptop. For a moment, she just sits there, listening to the quiet hum of the empty building, the distant sound of the city below. And in that silence, she knows this is the sound of a storm gathering, not of rage, but of reckoning. Because sometimes silence isn't submission, sometimes it's strategy, calculation, preparation. And when the storm breaks, every man who laughed will remember this night. The night Naomi Ellis worked alone, unseen, and rewrote the future while the rest of them slept. The room is alive with noise, cameras clicking, journalists whispering, flashes cutting through the air like lightning. The air feels electric, filled with a kind of excitement that borders on reverence. The company that was on the brink of collapse just a week ago has been saved, and everyone wants to know who did it. On stage, the host smiles, microphone in hand, ready to announce the mind behind the miracle. For days, the narrative has been that the executive board, led by the CEO, turned things around. Everyone expects him to walk on stage and soak up the spotlight. But the moment comes, and instead the host looks down at the card in his hand and says clearly, proudly, "The author of this report is Naomi Ellis." The room freezes. It's as if all the air has been pulled out at once. Cameras pause mid-flash, heads turn, murmurs ripple through the crowd. Naomi stands at the back of the hall, perfectly still. She doesn't rush. She doesn't smile. She just exhales, smooths the front of her navy blazer and walks forward. Each step echoes louder than the applause that slowly begins to rise, hesitant at first, then unstoppable. The CEO, sitting in the front row, goes pale. His hands tighten on his knees. The same man who once told her to leave the numbers to the big boys now has to watch as the board, the investors, the media, all eyes turn toward her. Naomi reaches the podium. The spotlight catches her face, soft but unyielding. She doesn't look at the audience first. She looks down at the paper in front of her, then up, directly at him. That single glance says everything. Not anger, not revenge, just truth. She adjusts the microphone, and for a heartbeat, the entire room is silent. When she speaks, her voice is calm, measured, certain. "Sometimes," she begins, her tone carrying easily across the hall, "the quietest voices are the ones that do the work no one sees. Not because they want to prove anyone wrong, but because they know what's right." A flash goes off, capturing her mid-sentence, poised, radiant, unshaken. She continues, "Numbers don't care who presents them. Truth doesn't need permission to be heard. And when you're underestimated long enough, eventually, silence becomes strategy." The audience erupts into applause, but Naomi doesn't bask in it. She nods slightly, steps back, lets the moment speak for itself. Behind her, the massive screen projects graphs, her data, her analysis, the blueprint that saved the company from financial collapse. Every executive in the room knows what they're seeing. Her work didn't just save the company, it exposed how blind they were. The CEO's jaw tightens. Cameras swing toward him, but he doesn't move. He knows the story has shifted permanently. Naomi glances at him one last time, not to humiliate, but to acknowledge, to confirm that she remembers everything he said, and that she chose not to answer, not because she couldn't, but because she didn't need to. The audience chants her name now. "Naomi! Naomi!" Journalists scribble, investors nod approvingly, and for the first time she allows herself a small smile. It's not pride. It's peace. The peace of someone who knew her value long before the world caught up. The camera pans closer. You can see the light catch the corner of her eye, the reflection of flashbulbs like tiny stars. In that glow, she isn't the quiet analyst in the corner anymore. She is the center, calm, composed, commanding. And somewhere in the front row, the CEO lowers his gaze, realizing the cost of his arrogance. The irony is perfect. The woman he silenced with a smirk now commands a room with a whisper. Naomi turns toward the crowd one last time and simply says, "Sometimes silence isn't submission, it's calculation." The audience roars, the lights flare brighter, and as the cameras capture her standing there, perfectly still amid the noise, it becomes clear. This isn't just a victory, it's a correction. The moment the world finally caught up with the woman who had been 3 steps ahead all along, the room falls silent. Not the kind of silence that comes from confusion or politeness, but the heavy electric kind that follows a moment no one expected. Naomi Ellis stands under the white glare of the stage lights, her posture calm, composed, unshaken. She looks out across the sea of suits, cameras flashing like fireflies, and then her eyes find him. The CEO, sitting in the front row, his face pale, his confidence evaporated. For a second, the world seems to stop breathing. Naomi holds the microphone, not like a weapon, but like a mirror. And then, with a voice steady as steel wrapped in velvet, she says, "Sometimes silence isn't submission, it's calculation." The words hang in the air, slow and deliberate, slicing through the tension like glass through smoke. The audience freezes, then erupts. Applause swells, waves of it crashing against the stage. Some stand, others look around as if realizing they've just witnessed something irreversible. She doesn't flinch, she doesn't smile wide or bask in it. She just stands there, perfectly still, perfectly certain. Because this moment was never about revenge. It was about truth, about patience, about the quiet kind of power that doesn't need to shout to be heard. As the applause rises, the camera moves closer to her face. There is no trace of anger, no need for validation, only calm triumph. Her eyes are steady, glowing softly under the light. Behind her, the massive screen flickers and words appear in clean white font. Dignity doesn't whisper. It waits. Then it wins. The audience reads it in silence now, the contrast almost poetic. A storm followed by still water. Naomi lowers the microphone, exhales slowly, and for the first time allows herself the smallest smile. Not pride, but peace. Around her, the lights shift from cold white to a golden hue, wrapping her in warmth, as if the universe itself acknowledges the symmetry of what just happened. The same walls that once echoed with laughter at her expense now vibrate with applause in her honor. The same men who once dismissed her now look at her with quiet respect, or guilt. She doesn't need to see their faces to know. She already calculated this moment long ago. This wasn't spontaneous, this was inevitable. The camera pans to the CEO again, his hands clasped together, the faintest nod of acknowledgement, though it comes too late to matter. Naomi gives one last glance in his direction, not out of spite, but out of clarity, a silent understanding that the lesson has been delivered, and she doesn't need to repeat it. She steps back, the sound of applause swelling again, her figure reflected in the glass wall behind her. 2 Naomis, one in the present, one that used to sit quietly in the shadows of that boardroom, unheard but watching. Now, they are one. The reflection straightens, merges with the real. The glass, once a barrier, now a mirror of triumph. As the lights dim, the final shot lingers on her reflection, golden, strong, whole. A voiceover echoes her words once more, softer now, like a truth the world finally understands. Sometimes silence isn't submission, it's calculation. Fade to black. Then in silence the final line appears. Dignity doesn't whisper, it waits. Then it wins. No music, no drama, just the sound of applause fading into the calm like justice itself exhaling.